you ever wondered why the calmest person in the room often holds the most power? They're not the loudest. They don't dominate the conversation. They don't chase approval or explain every move, and yet everyone senses something about them, something unshakable. People call them emotionless, but they're not numb. They feel everything. They just don't let it control them. Because here's the truth. Emotionless doesn't mean cold. It means calm. It means aware. It means powerful. We live in a world addicted to reaction. Say something. Prove yourself. Respond now. Defend your emotions. And if you don't, they call you distant, detached, dangerous. But the truth is, what most people call emotional distance is actually emotional discipline. You've probably met people like this. They don't argue, they observe, they don't chase chaos, they sit in silence. And that silence, it's not weakness, it's control. Because when everyone else is drowning in emotion, they're focused. While others panic, they assess. They don't suppress their feelings, they process them. And that's the difference. There's a line between suppressing emotion and mastering it. Suppression is fear. Control is power. You suppress when you're scared of feeling something. You control when you've felt it, named it, and decided what to do with it. This is where the misconception begins. People think emotionless people are robotic, but they're not. They've just stopped performing their feelings for the comfort of others. You're not weak for feeling. You're weak when your feelings run you. And most people, they're emotional slaves, controlled by opinions, likes, guilt, and fear. So when you meet someone who doesn't react, it unsettles you because you're not used to it. They don't play the emotional game. They don't beg. They don't justify. They walk away if they need to, and they leave you wondering why they didn't fight back. But that's the point. They don't need to win every argument because they've already won control over themselves. The Stoics understood this centuries ago. They taught, "He who angers you conquers you." Let that sink in. If someone can provoke you, you've already handed them your power. But when you respond from clarity, from calm, you stop being a puppet. You become still. And stillness is terrifying because it shows the world you're not desperate to be understood. You're not fighting to be liked. You're not explaining your value. You know who you are. You've faced your storms and you've learned to be the eye of them. So the next time someone calls you cold, ask yourself, am I cold or just in control? Because maybe what they fear isn't your lack of emotion, but your refusal to hand it over. You want to be free, free from manipulation, free from guilt, free from the chaos of other people's moods, but there's something standing in your way, something invisible, something that doesn't knock on the door because it already lives inside your house. Emotion. You think it's yours. You think your anger, your shame, your fear belong to you. But what if I told you, most of the time, your emotions aren't yours. They've been placed there by someone else to control you. We live in a world that runs on emotion, not logic, not truth, just reaction. Look around. Media, politics, social media, marketing, everything is designed to trigger you, to make you feel something fast. So you'll click, follow, buy, obey. Why? Because a reactive mind is an easy mind to control. Your brain loves shortcuts. It hates uncertainty. So when something emotional hits, your brain shuts down its logic and grabs the first reaction it can find. That's how manipulation works. Not with chains, but with chemicals. cortisol, adrenaline, dopamine. They don't argue with you, they hijack you. And when you're hijacked, you stop thinking, you start feeling. And when you start feeling without filtering, you become predictable. That's the trap, because predictable people are controllable people. Ever wonder why toxic people always want to trigger you? They know your buttons. They want you loud, flustered, dramatic, because then you're not powerful. You're exposed, vulnerable, defensive. And when you're defensive, you're not thinking clearly. You're not responding. You're reacting. Reaction is weakness, because it's borrowed behavior. You're not choosing it. It's choosing you. This is where emotion becomes a weapon, not just against you, but through you. Because here's the harsh truth. If you can't control your emotions, someone else will. That's why people who master emotional stillness become dangerous in the best way. They don't get baited. They don't swing at every insult. They don't defend themselves when provoked. They don't need to, because their silence becomes their defense. Their clarity becomes their offense. You've probably seen it. Someone stays calm in a storm of insults, and suddenly the attacker looks foolish. Because now the one yelling isn't the strong one, it's the one who looks out of control. That's the power of non-reaction. But here's the problem. Your mind isn't used to this. From childhood, you were trained to react, to please, to defend, to prove. And that wiring doesn't go away overnight. You'll feel the pull. You'll want to argue, to explain, to justify. But each time you don't, you get stronger. Each pause is power. Each breath is dominance. Each refusal to react is a declaration. I am no longer a puppet. The Stoics knew this well. They didn't teach emotional denial. They taught emotional distance, not to avoid pain, but to own it, to feel deeply but not obey it, to use emotion as information, not as orders. Because when you stop being ruled by how you feel, you start being ruled by what you know. And what you know is this: not every fire deserves your fuel. Not every insult deserves your voice. Not every storm deserves your sail. Your energy is sacred, and every time you don't give it away, you claim another piece of it back. So the next time you feel the burn of reaction rising, pause, breathe, and ask yourself, am I in control or being controlled? Imagine a fire, wild, uncontrolled, consuming everything in its path. Now imagine a firekeeper. He doesn't panic, he watches. He understands when to feed the flames and when to let them die. This is how the Stoics viewed emotion, not as an enemy, not as something to destroy, but as a force, one that must be tamed, not by aggression, but by awareness. Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." The Stoics believed that power doesn't come from suppression. It comes from choice, from the ability to feel deeply, but respond wisely. They never denied pain. They walked with it, observed it, named it, and then asked, is this worth my energy? Let that question echo for a moment, because what most people do is let pain speak for them. They become mouthpieces for wounds, reacting, explaining, justifying, trying to be heard, instead of trying to understand themselves. But the Stoics, they flipped that script. They believed emotion is not a command, it's a signal. Just because something hurts doesn't mean it controls you. Just because you feel anger doesn't mean you must explode. Just because you're afraid doesn't mean you stop moving. The Stoic path was built on this mantra: endure and observe. Because every emotion has a message, but not every message deserves a microphone. So how did they do it? How did the Stoics walk through fire without being burned by it? They trained, not in war, but in stillness. One exercise they practiced was premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of adversity. They visualized loss, rejection, death, failure, not to become pessimists, but to build emotional muscle, to remind themselves that nothing external is truly theirs, and that detachment is not coldness, it's clarity. Because once you've rehearsed the worst, you stop being ruled by fear. Another practice was voluntary discomfort, choosing hardship, sleeping on the floor, skipping luxuries, facing rejection. So when life threw chaos at them, they were ready, not shocked, not broken, prepared. It's easy to say, stay calm, but the Stoics trained for it. They taught that serenity is not the absence of pressure but composure under pressure, because true control isn't about hiding from emotion. It's about holding space for it and not letting it hijack your judgment. They mastered what modern psychology is only beginning to teach. Emotions are data, not destiny. When you feel anger, sadness, fear, you pause, you investigate, you respond, not for the world's approval, but for your own alignment. They called this virtue, not as a moral badge, but as a method of inner alignment, to live in harmony, not with the world, but with your own values. So what happens when you stop fearing emotion and start studying it? You begin to see the pattern, that most triggers are predictable, that people use emotion as manipulation, that calm is a shield and silence is a sword. The Stoic doesn't react to insult. He wonders why it landed. He doesn't flinch in chaos. He observes his breath. He doesn't run from pain. He sits with it until it speaks truth or fades into silence. That's the kind of power no one can fake, and that's why Stoics were never easy to manipulate, because when you master emotion, you master the battlefield that most people don't even know they're on, and once you become unshakable inside, nothing outside can take that from you. So the next time you feel the storm rise, remember Marcus's words: the mind adapts and converts to its own purposes. The obstacle to our acting, the impediment to action, advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. That's not denial. That's alchemy. That's Stoicism. Imagine someone insults you. They expect a spark, a flare of anger, a defense, a sharp reply, but you just look at them, breathe, say nothing, move on. They think you're weak. But here's what they don't realize: you just made the strongest move on the board, because not reacting is not passive. It's a decision, a statement, a shield. It's a language spoken in silence, and it speaks volumes. In a world addicted to noise, those who remain quiet become powerful. Because silence confuses people. They can't control what they don't understand, and nothing is more mysterious than a calm mind that refuses to be provoked. Seneca, one of the great Stoics, said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it, and one of the biggest wastes of life, reacting to every little thing, every insult, every misjudgment, every misunderstanding. You become a puppet, jerking with every pull of emotion, every tug of expectation." But the Stoic, he cuts the strings, not by running away, but by standing still, because stillness is not inaction, it's dominion. When you don't respond to provocation, you reclaim your narrative. You stop playing by someone else's tempo. You become untouchable. Why? Because you're no longer proving anything. You're no longer caught in the endless loop of, I have to explain myself, I need to be understood, I need to defend my worth. Number. You've moved into a new space, a higher frequency, where your silence doesn't mean weakness. It means I don't need to play this game. And here's the paradox. The more you don't react, the more powerful your presence becomes. Because reaction is expected, it's predictable, and anything predictable is controllable. But silence is a mirror. It reflects the other person's energy back to them. They say something cruel and get nothing in return, just their own words echoing in the stillness. That's when they begin to question themselves. That's when your restraint becomes their discomfort. That's when the power shifts, not through domination, but through containment. You're not cold, you're composed, you're not weak, you're intentional, you're not indifferent, you're selective with your energy, because not everything deserves your attention, not every storm deserves your ship. You begin to choose your battles, your silences, your exits, and that changes everything. This is what the Stoics called apatheia, not apathy in the modern sense, but freedom from passion's control. A mind so stable it cannot be baited, a heart so grounded it doesn't chase validation, a soul so calm that even in chaos it remains its own anchor. When you stop reacting, you start observing. You begin to see people for who they are, not who they pretend to be. You recognize manipulation, guilt trips, passive aggression, the games people play to pull you into their drama. But you stay outside the arena, not because you're scared, but because you've already won. The goal is no longer to win arguments, it's to preserve your peace. You learn the art of silence, a pause that cuts deeper than words, a gaze that disarms, a calm that dominates the entire room. And the world? The world respects that, not instantly, not always kindly, but eventually, because real power doesn't announce itself, it doesn't scream to be seen, it doesn't perform to be validated. It simply is, unbothered, unshakable, undeniable. So next time someone tries to pull you into chaos, into conflict, into reaction, ask yourself, do I need to answer, or do I need to stay free? Because in that single moment, you choose noise or peace. They think power is loud. They think control comes from force. They think influence is about being the loudest voice in the room. But here's the truth. Real power doesn't need to announce itself. Real control begins with one thing: emotional stillness. See, when you master your emotions, you master perception. And when you master perception, you control how others respond to you without even trying. People are constantly reacting, triggered by insults, overthinking compliments, chasing validation, avoiding rejection. But when you don't react, when you remain calm, grounded, unmoved, you instantly rise above the noise. And in that silence, people feel your gravity. There's something unsettling about someone who doesn't flinch under pressure, someone who doesn't chase, someone who doesn't need to be liked because they've already accepted themselves. The Stoics understood this centuries ago. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." That's the foundation, not money, not status, not how many followers you have. It's self-command. And when you have it, you stop reacting and start guiding. Let me explain something most people miss. In every interaction, there's a hidden power struggle, not just about what's said, but about who's emotionally dominant, the one who stays calm, who keeps their voice low, who listens more than they speak. Controls the tempo. They control the room because people don't follow noise, they follow certainty. And emotional control radiates certainty. Now, here's the paradox. The less you try to control others, the more control you naturally gain, because energy flows toward stability. Think about it. You walk into a room full of chaos. Everyone's shouting, scrambling, anxious, and then there's one person standing still, watching, calm. They become the center of attention. Not because they're loud, but because they're the only one not dancing to chaos. That's the magnetism of emotional stillness. It pulls people in, because in a world of nervous energy, a composed presence becomes power. Now, here's how it works in practice. Imagine someone disrespects you in public. Everyone's watching, waiting for your reaction. You don't yell, you don't retaliate. You just pause, say something simple, measured, grounded, or say nothing at all. Suddenly, the aggressor looks small. Their energy collapses because you didn't play their game. You didn't give them control. You stayed in yours. This isn't weakness. This is strategic power. It says, I'm not afraid. I'm not reactive. I choose my battlefield. And by doing that, you own the moment and the message. This principle applies everywhere, in arguments, in leadership, in negotiation, in relationships. When you control your emotions, you control your clarity. And when you're clear, you make better moves, not desperate ones. That's why so many powerful leaders, from Marcus Aurelius to modern thinkers, were calm under fire, not because they lacked emotion, but because they had mastered it. And here's something deeper. When you're not ruled by emotion, you become immune to manipulation. Guilt can't be used against you. Praise doesn't control you. Fear, you've already sat with it, faced it, tamed it. So now you respond instead of react. And that shift from reaction to response is the moment you go from being a pawn to being a player. Not in the petty sense, but in the deeper sense of awareness. You start seeing through people, reading their energy, not their words, and knowing when to engage and when to walk away. Because walking away, too, is power. Most people stay in battles they've already lost, not because they believe they can win, but because their emotions won't let them leave. You're not most people. You've trained. You've practiced presence. You've built emotional armor from silence, not noise. So when someone tests you, you no longer need to prove anything. And that's terrifying to them, because the one who doesn't need to win already has. So ask yourself, what if your emotional discipline was the greatest source of your influence? What if, instead of speaking louder, you simply spoke less but with precision? What if, instead of chasing control, you became control? Because the game doesn't belong to the loudest. It belongs to the most composed. And the moment you realize that, you stop playing to be seen and start playing to shape the world around you, silently, intentionally, powerfully. They tried to break you with chaos, with noise, with fear, with praise. They pulled every emotional string, hoping you'd react, hoping you'd fold, hoping you'd prove you're just like them. But you didn't, because something changed. You stopped being a reactor and became the architect of your responses, and now you see it clearly. The strongest force is not what moves first, but what doesn't move at all. You no longer chase validation. You no longer beg to be seen. You no longer explain what doesn't need defending, because now you've trained something deeper, your stillness, that silence in the face of chaos. It isn't emptiness, it's awareness, it's presence. It's a mind that refuses to be used as a puppet. See, the world fears what it can't control, and nothing is harder to control than someone who controls themselves. Look around. Most people are led by whatever pulls the strongest. Desire, anger, jealousy, insecurity. They don't live, they react. But you've sharpened your silence into a weapon, not to harm, but to protect your clarity, to preserve your energy, to shape the world without shouting at it. This isn't apathy, this is strategy, this isn't suppression, this is transformation. Because now, your power isn't just how you act, it's in everything you don't. The insult you don't acknowledge, the temptation you don't chase, the conflict you don't step into. That's where the real strength lives, not in what you fight, but in what you masterfully ignore. And now, you've become the storm's opposite, not the thunder, not the lightning. You're the calm eye that nothing can touch. And here's the paradox. They'll call you cold, distant, unfeeling. But inside, you've never been more alive, because it takes more courage to stay grounded than to lash out, more strength to hold peace than to chase power. And now you understand. The mind isn't a battlefield, it's a sanctuary. You don't need louder words, you need deeper roots. So let them throw noise, let them provoke, let them misunderstand. You don't owe chaos a reaction. You owe yourself peace, because when you master your reactions, you become the one thing the world can't predict, and the one thing it can't defeat. So the question isn't, what if someone disrespects you? Or what if they don't understand you? The real question is this: if you can control yourself, what can't you control?